Jesus is divine. He is the Lord, God of Israel. Jesus is human. He's one of us. He's the Son of Mary, the Son of David. And Jesus is one person. The Council of Chalcedon described Jesus as one person in or of two natures without confusion, change, division, or separation. I told you that's pretty abstract language, pretty dry. Let's see if it means more in a couple of days. But first, look at an implication of this claim. That in Jesus, the God of Israel and we, human beings, are together. Not confused or changed, but not divided or separated. That implies that we have a new, that we creatures have a new relationship with God. God is no longer merely our creator. Oh, he's still our creator. But now, alongside those relationships that describe us as creatures and God as our creator, now we have a new set of relationships with God. In Jesus Christ, God is our Father. In Jesus Christ, God is our brother. That is the astonishing insight of the church that set those who knew Jesus on a whole new course, proclaiming a whole world of difference from what they had known. The gospel means that we relate to God in a new way, an eternally new way. I think a helpful way to get at the church's emerging articulations of this conviction is to look at heresies, Christological heresies, ways of understanding Jesus that the church rejected. Proposals for construing Jesus as human or divine or both that were defective in some way, that the church had to reject because they compromised the gospel itself. They take back that new relationship in one way or another. Or they construe our new relationship with God as abolishing our old relationships with God. We are no longer creatures. Or some other such distortion. All right? And that adds up to the claim that they deny the incarnation. They deny the newness and the value, the accomplishment of the Word becoming flesh. And that means they deny the benefits that we have from that Word becoming flesh. I'm going to give you a working definition of a heresy. A heresy isn't just something that's not true, because, we disagree over a number of matters. Christians take different positions on a number of different matters, and you can even see theological variety in the New Testament itself. All difference is not heretical. Just not being right doesn't mean your position is heretical. Heresies are theological claims that violate the gospel itself, that warp it into a different gospel. And so when the church rejects a teaching as a heresy, it basically says, that's not our Jesus, that's not our gospel, that's not his kingdom. Now, I'm using the word heresy to describe a rejected teaching. What is a heretic? Well, a heretic, and mind this carefully because we throw the word around, people who hold rejected claims in ignorance are not understood to be heretics. So like 95% of you deny that Mary is God's mother. Okay. After this lecture, I hope you'll understand why it's a violation of the gospel to reject Mary as God's mother. And you'll see what I did when I changed my mind in a similar setting, in a similar class, and realized, no, that's something we have to maintain as the truth. So I wasn't a heretic, I just didn't know better. A heretic is someone who refuses the correction of the church on such a mistake. So So if I had said, I don't care that the church judged and rejected it, I'm still going to refuse the claim that Mary is God's mother, then I would have been a heretic. All right? So you're not heretics yet. That's the good news. At least not on that issue. You can subscribe to a heresy without being a heretic. Okay? Some of you might be thinking, what happens when the church's judgments are wrong? What happens when the church is inaccurate in its rejections? Well, we have a problem when that happens. And that has happened over the centuries. Sometimes the church jumps to the conclusion too soon that something is inappropriate. Sometimes it's caused lasting damage that hasn't been healed yet, as like the schism between Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants. There was a lot of condemnations of the other parties as heretics, and that turns out to have been spoken a little too soon, because despite these people who are supposedly heretics, and we all are according to somebody, the Lord still seems to be in our midst. We still seem to be receiving and passing on the good news. We still seem to be showing the fruit of the Spirit. We might have been presumptuous, not in taking sides, but in condemning what maybe we were too hasty to condemn. The church's judgments seem to have been sound in these cases. Although there will be a few who disagree. Actually, quite a few who disagree, as you'll see. Okay? That's the groundwork on the word heresy. So by looking at some of those rejected proposals, we can actually arrive at greater clarity on what the gospel does mean when we look at some of the things it doesn't mean. I'm going to give you 7 or so teachings that the church has rejected. They cluster into 2 groups. And you can give those 2 groups 2 names that are somewhat confusing. Adolf von Harnack's a 19th century German historian of theology. And he noticed the pattern that these teachings, they're not just 7 random teachings that all go in wrong directions. They seem to cluster into 2 groups. The first one he called adoptionism. And it seems to be drawing especially on the culture and the philosophical world of Antioch. The other cluster he called Docetism. And it seems to cluster around the culture and the philosophy that was dominant and influential in Alexandria, in Egypt. These were 2 intellectual capitals of Christianity in the first few centuries. The cultural context and the philosophical thinking of Antioch on the one hand, Alexandria on the other hand, actually helped Christian theology in both places come to insights that were otherwise harder to come to. But on the other hand, it also was dangerous, and some of the teachers in each place bought into the culture too uncritically and let the cultural assumptions of our relationship with God overshadow the gospel itself. So culture is a mixed blessing. It can give us insights. It supplies plausibility structures, as Newbegin describes, that we depend on completely for our insights. On the other hand, when those plausibility structures need correction by the truth, and if instead we try to correct the truth with our cultural assumptions, we can domesticate the truth, we can domesticate the gospel, and end up with a different gospel, a different Jesus. So the first cluster is called adoptionism, the second is called docetism. Here's why this is a little confusing. The word adoptionism applies both to the umbrella, the whole group, and to one of the schools within that umbrella. And the word docetism applies both to the umbrella, to the whole group, and to one within it. If that frustrates you, think of New York, New York. All right? New York is the name of a state and the name of a city. All right? Think of dogs. Isn't the biological name for a dog Canis canis? It's the name for the genus and the name for the species. And that can be confusing. You have to say, well, I'm talking about the genus now, not the species. But it's not like we can't. It's not like we don't end up doing this in every field. We do. Human beings make things complicated.